3 days after their disappearance, Rachel's husband received a letter, supposedly written by Rachel herself. The handwriting, the wording, the timing, none of it quite adds up.
Darkness Debaters starts now.
All right. Welcome back, Darkness Debaters, episode 2 of the Fort Worth Trio. Joining us again is MC.
Welcome, MC. How are you tonight?
As good as I can be.
We're glad
Very
to be back.
excited.
We're glad to have you back for round 2.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
You were very insightful in episode 1.
Yes.
I had no idea about, that little bit of dark history about Texas.
Yes, we appreciated that.
We appreciate
that
the
was
info.
really good.
Yes. But without further ado, let's get into the second part. We left everybody in a cliffhanger.
Yeah. So there was a letter that was received by Rachel's husband 3 days after their disappearance. Now, I want you to think about this is snail mail in 1974. It came in on December 26th. Christmas is one of the busiest times of year for the mail and always has been. And back in the 70s, everybody sent Christmas cards. So for this letter to be received 3 days after Christmas, especially from where it says they went, it would have had to have been mailed a week before their disappearance. This letter came in, and part of it said, "I know I'm going to catch it, but we had to get away. We're going to Houston. See you in about a week. The car is in the Sears upper lot. Love, Rachel." Now, there's some problems with this letter, okay? One of the problems is the envelope was written, like addressed and everything, in pencil. But the letter itself was written in ink pen. Now, if Rachel wrote this letter, how likely is it that she wrote out a letter in ink pen and then went and got a pencil to write the envelope? I guess you could argue that and say that she wrote the letter before they left and then didn't have an envelope or whatever and had to get an envelope from where, from going to Houston. But from Houston to Fort Worth in 1974, especially with Christmas being a holiday. So, and it says, we'll be back in a week. A week from what? A week from the 23rd? A week from the 26th? I feel like she would have been more
forthcoming.
Yeah, she would have been a little bit more descriptive and not just said, "We'll be back in a week." I've also heard in my research and found that we're not even sure that letter went through the post office. It's believed that it could have been just placed in the mailbox. The postmark up in the corner was very faded and smudged, almost as if it was done on purpose so that you couldn't see where it was sent from or when it was sent. And the stamp was very faded. So there's those things to consider.
Yeah, and her family also said that she never really signed her letters with her full Rachel name. It was usually with just Rach and maybe a little heart sign next to it. So her family found that kind of odd. And they also questioned the handwriting. Her family didn't believe it was her handwriting. However, Tommy, her husband, he insisted pretty early on that that was indeed her handwriting.
And the FBI handwriting experts have never been able to confirm or deny positively whether or not that was Rachel's handwriting. They have looked through hundreds and hundreds of pieces of papers and things that Rachel had written, things that she had written, and compared it to that letter. And they have never been able to conclusively say one way or another if it was her handwriting.
No, I think it really says a lot.
Yeah. And, you know, if you're writing a letter to your spouse, what's the likelihood that you're going to use his full government name?
See,
Yeah.
I had read, and the little bit of research that I was able to do on the case, I had read that the husband himself was a little confused as to why she said his full name and called him Thomas instead of just Tommy.
Right. And it's a good question because I don't think she ever called him Tom.
Yeah.
And just I pulled up a couple of more discrepancies because there are so many discrepancies. It's hard to keep up with everything. Rachel, written in the upper left-hand corner of the envelope, you know, for the return address, appeared initially to be misspelled. It looks like the L was written as a lowercase e, but then they went back over it to correct it. The postmark did not contain a city and only a blurred zip code that appears to be 76083, but the number 3 appeared to be backwards, as though it was applied by a hand-loaded stamp or a partial 8. So it's assumed that the zip code was meant to either be 76038, which is from Eliasville, Texas, or 76088, which is from Weatherford, Texas. And then, yeah.
Weatherford is kind of in close proximity to Fort Worth.
Yeah. Weatherford wouldn't be too far for them to get away. I'm not sure where
Eliasville.
Mm-hmm. But the girls' families, they don't believe that letter was written by Rachel.
Weatherford would also, because we started by mentioning it was around the holidays when this letter would have been sent through the mail. So if Weatherford was close enough, would that have affected how fast it got to them? And would that make it more likely that they were there instead of Eliasville?
It could have gotten there a little bit faster. I'm trying to remember exactly how the mail system. I saw something about how the mail system worked, like everything had to go to a certain place. And a lot of things back in the 70s, I think were still, I don't think we had the automation in the mail system that we have today. I think a lot of sorting and stuff was still done by hand. Yeah. I could be wrong about that, but I think in 1974, there was a lot of still doing everything manually. I don't think there was a lot of automation.
Yeah, they went missing on the 23rd. Then the mail would have ran on the 24th. So that's one day, and then Christmas there would be no mail, but they received it the very next day after that on the 26th. Yeah, and we're talking about 1974, without all the automation. Nowadays they have the machines that read the addresses and the zip codes. they didn't have that back then. And I can see that that's kind of close.
Yeah.
Putting it real
That's
close.
only 2 days. If she dropped it off before 3 p.m.,
That's
because the mail cutoff, as far as I know, was 3 p.m. So if you dropped a letter off after 3 p.m., it was not processed till the next day,
Yeah.
which would have been the 26th. At our, yeah, if she dropped it off, well, it could have been the 24th. If she dropped it off after 3 p.m. on the 23rd, but if she dropped it off on the 24th after 3 p.m., it wouldn't have been processed until the 26th. So the day they received it is the day that it would have been processed.
Yeah.
And I'm
So-
guessing there was no next day shipping back then.
I don't think so. I don't think there was next day shipping. I could be wrong, but
I could be wrong.
I think that was the day that was the days before that. But there were some potential persons of interest back then that we do want to go into. There was an older man that people saw talking to the girls at the mall. There were reports of a security guard interaction, which was not followed up on until recently, like the last couple of years. Almost 50 years later, they never talked to that security guard back then. And there was a tip about the girls being forced into a vehicle. There were also a lot of confessions, false confessions, claims that the girls were taken out of state, and sightings were reported for several years afterwards.
One serial killer.
Yes, there was a serial killer that confessed to killing the girls. And it was found to be
Henry Lee Lucas.
Yes, Henry Lee Lucas said he did it, but they found out that he did not.
He was a big liar.
Yeah, Henry Lee Lucas. I think that wasn't uncommon for him to confess to things that he didn't actually do. He enjoyed the attention, and kind of the notoriety that he thought he would get by being the one that kidnapped and murdered the Fort Worth trio. But going back to this security guard interaction, so there was a security guard working the mall who said and reported to police that he saw the girls, at least one of them, in a pickup with another security guard that he knew. And he reported that to the police. And the police never questioned that security guard in 1974 or 1975. They never questioned that security guard. As a matter of fact, the original security guard that reported it, I don't think that they actually reached out to him until recently. So the security guard that reported it told the police what he could remember from 1974, almost 50 years later. If I've got that right, if they did talk to him recently, I'm sorry, I've watched a lot on this, but they did talk to the security guard that supposedly had an interaction with the girls. And his response when they said, "Did you have any interaction with the girls?" was, and that was 1974. I just don't remember. That's a problem, y'all. That's a problem that this was not followed up on in 1974. Even if they thought the girls were runaways, even if they really believed that, it seems like that would have been a simple phone call to say, "Hey, we heard you were interacted with the girls. Do you happen to know where they went? Do you happen to know, anything about when are they coming home?" In 1974, if that guy would have told them, oh, I don't know anything about that, they could have investigated and had a little bit of science on their side. But what's the likelihood they're going to find that guy's truck in 1974 with evidence in it today to prove or disprove that he had at least Rachel in the truck with him? The theory around that was that Rachel was having an affair with his security guard, and that Lisa and Julie, seeing him and finding out about this affair, set him off. So he did something to the girls. I think that's probably a stretch, but I think that security guard probably has an idea of what happened to him. He might not have been the one that did it, but that's
So to answer the question, what the odds are of them finding evidence in his vehicle now, like if they were to get their hands on it and it was, in whatever condition it would be in at this point, it would really depend on if he had actually deep cleaned it, because there's a lot of stuff that will last for a very long time, even 50 years later. There's stuff that we've pulled, like vehicles that we've pulled out of lakes that have been in these lakes for decades, and they still have evidence inside of them.
Yeah.
That being said, the odds of him even still owning that vehicle are slim to none. I mean, that this is 50 years, cars break down, cars go bad, or
Yeah.
you can't afford to maintain them anymore. You give them away to family members, you sell them off. The odds that are just negligible at this point. I had, in the bit of studying that I did to prepare for this for the discussions on this cold case, I had seen that there was another person of interest that they had been interviewing. Um, and I believe he was alleged. I'm not entirely sure if they actually tried him on any of it, but from what I understand is that Rachel was believed to have gone to a record store the day that the three girls went missing, a record store that she had applied to work at. And there was a guy that was currently working there that was abusing his position on the inside to obtain contact information from women that had applied to work there. And he had allegedly called and left disturbing voicemails, and had called and participated in disturbing calls with up to 5 women, and allegedly Rachel was one of these girls as well. So
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that it was a thing. I read it on the Wikipedia article for the case.
Oh,
Um,
that's really interesting, because if we circle back to the letter, obviously, if Rachel was forced to write this letter or not, we don't know if it's her handwriting or not. If she didn't write it, then possibly somebody who had some kind of knowledge of maybe her address or her family members, things that you would find on a job application
Yeah.
would, yes.
I hate to interrupt. The biggest problem with finding anything out about it in especially nowadays, is that in the 90s the gentleman in question committed suicide,
Um,
and the police ordered that every file that they had on him in connection to this case be destroyed.
um,
There was a there was a private investigator that was hired. Let me see. And I believe when that private investigator passed away, yeah, that private investigator had all of his files destroyed when he passed away. He died of a drug overdose. That was a private investigator. What was his name?
John Swaim. So I misspoke. John Swaim was the one that died of the overdose.
Yeah,
They
he
and
died.
they
Yeah, he died of the overdose.
Okay.
His death was ruled to be a suicide, and upon his death, he had ordered that all of his case files be destroyed. So they couldn't get a hold of any of his. I mean, he had interviews. He had that he may have had evidence that we don't know about. Timelines, everything that he had done from 1975 to 1979. Every person he had talked to, every phone number he had, every piece of contact destroyed on his death. And it wasn't just for this case, it was for all of his cases, which makes me wonder, what was he looking at? What did he have that he was so afraid of people finding out? Or did he really do the overdose by himself?
So Swaim was the one in August 1975, after being hired by the families. He discovered that a 28-year-old man, we don't have his name, well, at least in this article, his name isn't available. Swaim discovered that a 28-year-old man who had worked for a local store where Rachel had applied for a job before her disappearance was making a string of obscene phone calls in the area. It was discovered that the man was using his position to obtain information from young women who had submitted job applications or had been listed as references. 6 female job applicants received obscene phone calls, and the man had also once lived in the neighborhood of Rachel's parents, but moved away shortly before Rachel married. In the end, though, nothing came of the investigation into this subject.
Yeah,
That's really disheartening.
that is disheartening because honestly, with them not talking to that security guard, I don't know. I don't know that I believe that. I don't know that I believe they did a good, investigation of that, but they might have. They might have.
Yeah.
Well, it's especially for the time period, um, historically speaking, especially based off of what we know of cases, public information and whatnot. Again, I'm not a college educated professor or professional on the matter. So this is all just stuff that I was able to learn on my own time. Um, and it is from a layman's perspective at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Um, However, even in the 70s, Fort Worth and Dallas and the area that they lived in was a very large area. And they probably dealt with multiple cases of missing minors that, oh, they had just went and stayed at a friend's house and didn't tell their parents, and their parents started overreacting. So, not jumping on the ball immediately was a lot more acceptable back then because communication wasn't nearly as intense as it is today. I mean, if your child is out a little longer than you expect them to be, they more than likely have a phone on them. You can text them, you can call them, get in touch with them. And then if that doesn't work, people start to get worried. But, back in the day, they could have been hanging out with other friends from their school, or they could have been over at a friend's house getting up to trouble like kids normally do, which is why the cops probably because that's what a majority of these cases turned out to be, was just the lack of communication between parents and children led the parents to be rightfully concerned for the welfare of their kids, because even though a majority of cases turned out to be all right, there were still plenty of cases that didn't. And there
Yeah.
were still plenty of cases of kids going missing and never being heard from again, such as the milk carton kids.
Yeah.
Um, so you're looking at a police force, especially the Youth Crimes Investigation Bureau of the police force, that is probably, I wouldn't necessarily say jaded. Like from an outside looking in, hindsight being 2020 in the modern day, not immediately jumping on it and attacking or investigating as hard as they can every person that is reported to be involved in it probably made more sense to them. Because if these kids really were just, you know, being kids and getting into trouble and hanging out with friends and such, and they just weren't talking to their parents because they were frustrated or angry or whatever, then they're harassing these innocent people for no reason. And the more time that passed, the more time, you know, if anything did happen to the girls, evidence could be destroyed or could be hidden. If they were just kidnapped, they could be being transported across state lines or across border lines. So it's that kind of balancing act at that time people were more okay with. Nowadays, especially considering how big of an issue it's become, you're going to go out and question those people. You're
Mhm.
even if the kids, even if the parents say, I'm just worried about them, but they do have a habit of going to a friend's house and just not talking to us. Even if you say that, these days the police officers will still go and follow up any lead they can until
Right.
those kids come home, because it's better to be safe than sorry more now than it was back then.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
now I'll tell you what, that depends on the case and the department and the area, because we've been reporting a lot today, and there's going to be a case coming up that we went over, the Hannah Harris case. And when it comes to Indigenous women, police response is almost nil. Um, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It's not just because, oh, the police are horrible and they don't do their job. There's a lot of reasons for that, but a lot of it, like what you're saying makes sense.
Mhm.
And you could say, yeah, and especially back in 1974, where we didn't know as much as we know now. But that kind of stuff is still going on today, and it's going on a lot more than it should be. Just a quick, just kind of give some background of what I'm talking about. Why Hannah Harris was a 21-year-old mother of a 10-month-old son who disappeared after going out on July 4th. Her mother went and tried to report her missing. They told her, she'll be back. Don't worry about it. She'll be back. Her mother and family are the ones that had the search put together that actually found her. They found her days after the disappearance, before the police were even involved, because the police, didn't have the manpower. They said they didn't have the manpower. However, the sheriff said nobody ever called them for help. They would have come out and helped them. Nobody ever called them. So that actually got a law changed. That happened in Lame Deer, Montana, and that got a law changed that's no longer an option. That they have it set up where there is somebody who will take that report and start searching for that person. Because when they did find her body, it was so badly decomposed that they couldn't even figure out a cause of death. And they had to do a plea deal with the people who did it, basically because they couldn't have tried it. They wouldn't have been successful because the evidence was so destroyed and they couldn't even determine how she died. So, so we do still have that going on more than it should be. But states are like Montana and Oklahoma Oklahoma passed Ida's law, which was another indigenous woman. States are starting to pass laws to take these things seriously. I feel like it needs to be on a federal level, but
I agree.
anyway, I got way off track there. Sorry.
Back to the Fort Worth trio.
Yes. We are going to wrap part 2 up. MC, do you have any final thoughts you want to share with us?
Yeah. It's again, it's really easy to be on the outside looking in and not having actually had a hand in the case to draw your own conclusions. And, you know, I know that's not what we do here. We're just discussing the case and discussing the circumstances of the case and whatnot. So was it a kidnapping? Was it just runaways and maybe they befell some danger? Was it police incompetence or were the police just overworked considering they were in a metropolitan area? I mean, we'll never know, but these are all things that should be considered, especially now that we may never actually see this case get solved. I mean, after 50 years, bar the person responsible coming out and admitting it to it and leading police to the location of the girls, or bar the girls coming back and saying, yeah, we ran away. The odds of us actually seeing this case be wrapped up neatly and nicely are very low, and it's heartbreaking, but we have to discuss things like this to make sure that they don't happen in the future.
Right. So to end this episode, we will be back for a part 3 because in 2001, the case was reopened. And there have actually been, since 2001, I believe it was in 2018, but I'll verify my dates before we come back. They pulled some vehicles out of a lake near Fort Worth. And we're going to talk about what they found. And I also believe there was a possible grave that was discovered. And we're going to talk about that and what they discovered there. And that will be in part 3, our conclusion of our coverage of the Fort Worth trio. And we will also be linking a whole bunch of material because this case, we could easily talk about this case for 2 or 3 hours and still have several episodes. So this is a very brief summary of this case. Please go look into it. There's so much more information about this case, more details. We're just giving you the summary.
Yeah.
But anyway,
until next time, darkness debaters, keep shining light where darkness dwells. And
Absolutely.
we'll see you again back for part 3, and we'll be having MC back for part 3.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So exciting to have him join us.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here, MC.
Thank
Of
you.
course, I enjoy being here.
Yeah. All right, guys. Until next time, take care. Keep shining light where darkness dwells. Turn those lights on. Darkness won't win.
Right.
Bye, guys.
Bye.